Welcome to the Global Trade Repository GTR Overview webcast. This overview is geared towards those who are new to the GTR product and therefore avoids technical detail. Part 1 focuses on placing GTR in context so that you can better understand the role it seeks to play and therefore its value. The Global Trade Repository receives and validates derivatives trade data. Raw trade data is submitted by one or more parties to the trade, i.e. the buyer, the seller, and any third party that might be involved. Because not every OTC derivatives contract has a buyer and seller, it is actually more accurate to refer to counterparties, but for this introductory level of training, we will use the more commonly understood terms given here. GTR captures data for the entire trade lifecycle, from inception up to the maturity of the trade, including post-trade lifecycle events. GTR applies strict data integrity and regulatory standards before admitting the validated data to DTCC's already huge dataset. This vast resource of accurate data can then be used for cross-referencing all subsequent activity, building an ever more robust and efficient process. The net result is that all parties better understand their overall trade activity, position, and exposure, thereby reducing risk and making it possible to trade more efficiently. This validated data is also available to regulators who use the increased transparency to help reduce systemic risk. Exactly what data they see is determined by regulation. GTR is a data warehousing service aimed at reducing the fragmentation of OTC derivatives trading, tracking, and reporting, and so comply with the transparency requirements established by Dodd-Frank, EMIR, and similar regulations in the other jurisdictions we cover. In Europe only, it is also a requirement to report ETDs. Derivatives trading activity is typically scattered globally across multiple markets and platforms and is usually high speed, high volume, and high value. It is beyond the capabilities of most businesses or regulators to gain a holistic and accurate view of all this activity. The absence of this insight leads to obvious attendant risks of criminality and unsafe market practices. No one wants a repeat of the 2008 crisis, and although not yet offering a truly holistic perspective, GTR continues to make strides towards this goal and so contributes to market integrity and stability. Reducing trade fragmentation and increasing transparency requires the harmonization of as much global derivatives trade data as possible. DTCC has leveraged its state license dominance of the US market to centralize trades within the US, whilst outside the US, DTCC has established further data repositories and negotiated licenses with the likes of the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. The net result is increased visibility of local and cross-border trade activity for every participant, whether business or regulator. GTR is the name for this global service. Who uses GTR? All the data that GTR processes either comes from direct participants or other repositories that feed data for their jurisdictions into GTR. GTR accepts all trades and provides open access to the parties of trades, including third parties. It also offers regulators access. However, what data a party can see is governed by regulation and their role in the trade. Every jurisdiction has its own regulations governing derivatives trading. Perhaps the most well-known is the Dodd-Frank Act. This act is one of the many regulations to emerge in response to the global financial crisis of 2008. It applies to all US entities, citizens, and US securities. Unlike most other regulations, Dodd-Frank is extraterritorial, i.e., applies and is enforced globally by US regulators. Another well-known regulation is EMIR, which is enforced in Europe by ESMA. Whilst Dodd-Frank and EMIR are two of the many regulations, some of the regulatory bodies themselves are shown here. One of the major challenges facing the financial sector is the lack of coherency between the hundreds of regulators who each have different definitions, standards, and so on, all of which change over time. One of the major benefits of GTR is that the trade data it collates is validated and formatted to ensure compliance with the latest regulatory requirements for the jurisdictions it supports. GTR is only one product that DTCC offers to meet the needs of the trade lifecycle and associated environment. Although this diagram shows it toward the end of the trade process, GTR and the data it manages actually influences the whole lifecycle. To understand GTR, we need to understand its origins. DerivServe was launched in 2006 as a business focusing on efficiencies, cost saving, and risk mitigation. However, after the 2008 financial crisis, addressing regulatory change emerged as a prime focus. OTC derivatives played a significant role in the 2008 crisis, as a result of which governments and regulators placed great emphasis on improving the regulation of the derivatives markets, with this being a focus of the G20 summit. In just the jurisdictions covered by GTR, 67 new and updated regulations were released over 3 years. GTR was developed to help businesses successfully face this avalanche. As such, the trade repositories from which GTR is comprised began going live in 2013.